Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to tonight's Q&A screening of No Time to Die. My name is Robbie Collin. I'm the Telegraph's film critic, and it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce the film's director, Cary Joji Fukanaga, and cinematographer, Linus Sandgren. Congratulations both on the film. Before we launch into the heavy cinematography stuff, I want to start by asking about Daniel's final scene in this, while it's still fresh in everyone's minds. I think the performance that he gives in that scene is so great and so unlike what we expect, I think, from a Bond film. How did you go about shooting and staging? And I'm talking about, the shooting through the ladder, straight into his face, up on the roof of the bunker at the end, to elicit that kind of performance, obviously on a film of that scale, is quite tough, I would imagine.
Actually, it's a good note. I hadn't thought about it in a while, and the reason why we want to be behind the ladder is really to be close to his face, and that dialogue is like, typically you would think he may sit somewhere and have this dialogue with someone, and you could be on a close-up. So it was a way to be close to him, but we had to build the set that way that we had an open wall. We could open the wall behind the ladder so that we could get the crane in there and track with him up.
Yeah, I forget exactly why I wanted him to go to the roof. I think because I just wanted him to have an eye line with the island that Madeline was on, so he wasn't just sitting in a bunker somewhere, which meant that he had to get to a roof somewhere, and I think the ladder made the most sense. So it was really just a practical choice, but also just the idea that he's struggling, with his last sort of bit of force to get to this place. And
sort of a physical metaphor as well, to just go all the way to the top and that's it. It's like there's nowhere else to go now, I think, right? But it's also something beautiful with him watching. They're looking at each other, even though they can't see each other because it's too far, but they actually do look at each other.
Cary, was there ever a version of the story where that didn't end on this moment, that saved Bond at the end of it, or was it always fixed that he was going to?
There's no alternate ending. There was different endings written about how it would be treated, but no, from the moment I first met with Barbara, Michael, and Daniel, this was something they wanted. We didn't know how exactly, but they wanted death.
But wasn't it also two scripts? One for the crew and one for the core crew or something? Or it was just left out, maybe?
We always just left it out. Every time we had to do things, we took out that
it was
section.
it was omitted from. Yeah. But because we had to always not talk to the crew about it. So it was like kind of...
Linus, was it in the first script that you saw, or was it withheld even from...
Oh, yeah, it was in the script, yeah.
When you read that script...
We let Linus know what was happening.
I don't know if there was a script, though, in the beginning. Yeah.
When you read that script for the first time, was there a particular scene or a sequence or an image that jumped out at you as being, this is something that I can't wait to shoot?
The problem is Linus didn't get a script.
Right. It wasn't like one finished script in the beginning of our process. One scene that I was really excited about, was kind of a childish excitement, was the trawler and how to do that with that underwater scene and stuff. I thought, well, that was cool. But I mean, there's many scenes in here that I think was interesting. But our process began, with just with Cary having an idea about like that all these scenes throughout the film should have a great dynamic range between emotions, and that itself was how we started the process of like working out the cinematography in the film. And it has to do a lot with really, like in any movie, I think, or any film, it's like the only way to start is to start with like thinking of it as a cinematography as an emotional tool, like you can how to evoke emotions. And I think in this case with Bond, you have so many different types of emotions to work with. It's not just in one genre. It's like comical, and it's lots of stress in the action. And there's, in this case, in this film, there's so much intimate emotional aspects to it. So we sort of worked out the language, how to tell the story and how to differentiate between these different situations in the film, where we had to be kind of thinking kind of classically, I think, about everything. And which I think we have very much in common is like how we see films, or what we appreciate with films is like when you have at least an idea of what you want to, how you want to tell the story, and then you find sort of a reason for what does it mean when the camera is still, or what does it mean when it's moving, or what does it mean when it's handheld, or why do you choose what you choose, and that's a lot of what I feel is like the most important process in the beginning of the journey, with or without a script. And then when you get sort of the script proper, and you can analyze each scene and just develop the language from there, and it all just comes naturally. And then there was another aspect that we worked on, which already happened in the script when he was writing with the writers, was to put Bond in situations that would take place in different places and different parts of the world, and to differentiate those locations itself, so that the film could sort of live up to the Bond quality of the exotic locations and stuff. But it all, the bottom line is still that you would sort of discover those places with Bond in a way that we find in the sort of language of it, how we design the language of it. But
Cary, I think what Linus is saying there comes across incredibly powerfully in that transition from Cuba to the trawler scene, because Cuba has this, I don't know, the kind of classical Bond glamour. You get the first look at Daniel in the tux, and it all looks incredibly wonderful. Ana de Armas is there, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of fun. And then suddenly when they land, is it like the first shot when they land on the trawler, there's this kind of red light wash across all the act, and you're like, okay, so suddenly we're somewhere else. The mood has really kind of changed. I mean, how did you kind of plot that out from scene to scene, Cary? Did you have a sense of how you wanted the energy to move through the film, or a particular texture you wanted to bring to each location?
I think we had a pretty good sense of the shape of the story. Like, we knew when we could have fun, and we knew when we had to buckle down and be more serious. The opening is really meant in a lot of ways to be an answer to what's left unsaid in Spectre, and to create a lot of tension, and to hopefully provide what's often expected in these films. There's this I think the technical term is fridging, and it's when these action films take the woman from the previous film and get rid of her somehow. And there's been that in all kinds of kind of Hollywood type films, and I think in this film we wanted to break away from that expectation that Léa Seydoux would be only in Spectre by having her start off the film really and end the film, but also integrating her more deeply into his ultimate demise, and but also at the same time being the sort of the answer to what he needed, So the beginning is trying to accomplish a lot of things in a very short period of time, and then from the title sequence, we knew, we had to get the present tense story moving, which is a different feel and look, to then finding Bond in retirement, which is a different feel and look, to then being back on mission and what that entails, and the excitement of Cuba, to then the real stakes that are sort of displayed once the weapon is explained and Felix Leiter gets shot. And then there's just all these little steps and stages that go that each have different kind of color. And as you kind of step back and look at it in a more architectural way, you can get a sense of how these different moods and tones fit together, and where we could vary them in a way that made it feel like, as Linus was saying, when you finally step away from the film, as you've all just done right now watching it, you feel you've traveled the world and traveled across time.
I think even within that pre-credit sequence, where you have the chilly, snowy, frozen lake, and then straight into Matera, which has such an incredible visual texture of its own, that immediately catches the audience off guard. I mean, filming in Matera itself must have been challenging, right? Because that city has been around for 1,000 years or so, and it does not look like it's particularly amenable to
8,000 years.
8,000 years.
One of the oldest inhabited cities in Europe. The word troglodytes comes from Matera. The troglodytes used to live in the caves there.
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, it's a rocky city, and I think they had one or maximum two entrances to the town, which made it really hard. And we took over the whole town. We had, I don't know how many locals. We had like hundreds of locals just helping us lock off traffic and stuff for the car chases. And
do you remember the local guy that was like our fixer?
Yeah.
When we were first scouting, with this guy that was like, it was very sus, the whole thing. And we went into places that didn't seem like we're allowed to go into, but everyone knew this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we probably should be happy we had him. But no, and there's lots of stuff like that comes into technical challenges we had, because we sort of didn't want to give up too easily with ideas. Like, for example, that when we shot the water sequence when she's swimming, that is in Marathi on the other side of the ocean, and she drives those beautiful roads, because that felt very Bond-esque, and it's sunset because it should feel romantic now, and it's very contradictory to how she feels. She was obviously lying about her memory, and the memory was very cold, and then there's sort of a tone then that is very romantic, how they come to the hotel, and on the way to the hotel you enter the city. We needed an entrance to the city from this tunnel, and there's no tunnel, so Mark Tildesley and the production designer designed a tunnel that's I forgot how long it is now, but it's very long. It's just a black tunnel, so we could exit the tunnel where we
enter the tunnel on the coast.
Yeah, exactly,
and then exit it in Matera.
And then come into like the best possible establishing shot of the town in a picturesque way. And we found that being that spot that we found. It's just that there's no tunnel and there's like a downhill slope. So in order to get that shot proper, we had to like put a long crane, like a 42-foot hydroscope on a vehicle, and chase that car down and out over. But we discovered we tried many different versions of that, like can we put it on a drone, can we put it on helicopter or on such things. But yeah, there were technical challenges like that, or that we wanted the perfect view for their hotel room, and we were not allowed to build on that spot because that's a view for visitors or tourists. So we built that below.
When we scouted Matera, it was one of the first places we went. I mean, because of the way this production came together and the way I took over once Danny Boyle left, there was a lot of urgency, we can say. And there was decisions that had to be made before the script was even done. And Mark, we knew we wanted there to be this unraveling in the relationship, and we just had to pick a location. And then I was going to fill in from there what happened to this location. But we had to pick it. So we picked Matera very early because it was going to take months to get all the permissions we needed to do the stunts that would be required in the opening of a Bond film. So one of the first things we did, we knew that they were going to be coming there as visitors, is find a place for a hotel. And the site we picked, we found in like December, which is, there are no people in Matera. It's the lowest end of the tourist season. But it just so happened we're not the only ones that think that's a good view. And that's like the premier viewing spot for the city. And every tourist is like guided to this place to take a picture of Matera. Except no one mentioned that to us when we picked it. So, and then it became a big negotiating thing to get that location to build a kind of facade from our hotel room set. And then the compromise was that they built it on the scaffolding below. But it's a compromise for the city, but it became a much more expensive shot because instead of putting it on this little terrace that existed, we had to essentially build a 7-story or 6-story tall piece of scaffolding.
Scaffolding to, build the set on. And really only for one shot where we follow Leah out of the doorway to see the city. And that town was also then pre-lit with many lights, and because we couldn't use the light that existed, it was very green, like street lights. So we had to take them all out and put our own lights there to have the flame light.
Linus thought the cold light wasn't pretty, so we replaced every light in Matera.
But do you know what? When I saw that I thought this is playing to your strengths as a cinematographer so enormously, that kind of amazing sunset, that purity of colour in it, and,
right.
and the accent from the the flames going upwards.
But what I would like to say, because I mean, as much as cinematography is technical, I think the technicalities are like it's a Bond movie. We had a lot of resources, luckily as well, on pursuing sort of various complicated ideas. But I think the thought behind this film is very much what I started talking about, the sort of the emotions of the story, right? So what's so cool with this location, which I think Materia is such an interesting location story-wise, because it is a picturesque, very beautiful town, and we set it in the sunset to be extra romantic, and it goes into dusk, and then they sit there in the twilight, and she goes out and burns these things in twilight, and the next morning it's very still beautiful, romantic. And then he walks to this graveyard, and suddenly the city changes into something really harsh and sort of contrasty and hard. And if you're going to have a car chase in a town, it's like Materia is not the town you want to be in, having a car chase, because it will hurt very much to hit yourself in the town. So it's like throughout the film, I think we try to think about these things visually and be careful about why is it a sunset, why is it and it's many things that affects it, and one is basically the emotional ride that we're on, but also to differentiate. So sometimes we shoot night instead of day because we want to change the scene so that the audience would like feel like we're in a new environment, and maybe it's also based on suspense or based on. So the lab later then when we come back is sort of that dusk sky, and then the lab has completely different colors, and the same with the language of the sort of camera work is that. For example, in the lab, which is a super precise operation, and to tell this is a super precise operation, we came up with a lot of those shots that are like very like sort of technically like sort of smooth moves, while other scenes where we are in a much more sort of uncertainty or Bond is unstable. It would be like handheld. And so we did, find a language like that throughout before we set up those scenes. But so I think to say that's it's like, I think you all constantly had in mind that this is a film that it should feel real. Everything should feel for real, but it's heightened. It's like you can find these locations in this time of day. It could be people throwing papers, burning out the windows, but they happen to be the right then, and it becomes a little more romantic. But it could exist, It's like Jamaica could look like it looked, but we had to build it to make it look that way. But
Cary, what Linus is saying about those shot choices in the suspenseful and the action moments, I think with Bond, over the years, often the films have been quite reactive in the way that they portray action. So in Quantum of Solace, it was very kind of Paul Greengrass driven. In Skyfall, you get that influence from The Dark Knight coming through really powerfully. But in this film, I didn't detect, it felt much more agenda setting, like you were kind of figuring this stuff out specifically and not kind of following kind of pre-established trends, if that makes sense. I mean, did you have a sort of an action look in mind, or?
I didn't get that memo that we're going to copy the other films. I mean, that'd have been
I think it's something that happens
organically. These action
That's the way
sequences if we could have just based it on another movie. This is the first time I've ever worked with a second unit, and the interesting complications that creates is having to communicate and try to set up a dogmatic approach, or at least some kind of theme that other people then have to interpret. And of course, we have storyboards, but storyboards and even animatics don't always translate to real pictures. So one of the things we talked about very early on was what I didn't want to do is just put 12 cameras out and cover a car exploding or cover a car screeching around a corner, but try to design shots that had a point A to point B kind of linear direction and
purpose,
and they connect, and so each of ththese shots line up or should line up with each other. That's not to say there aren't some inserts or things that were additional pieces of photography that we were able to take advantage of, but wanted to be thoughtful ahead of time and not just cross our fingers and see what we got. And so that went for pretty much every sequence. And what ended up happening too is that because second unit is facing different kind of weather, and weather inconsistency was something we were often facing. Second unit, Matera, for example, got rain almost the entire time they were shooting. So when they did get glimpses of the sun, they would get some stuff, and they got some great material. But it meant that a lot of shots we wanted from them, we didn't get in time. So then Linus and I ended up doing some of those shots in first unit, but in a much more compressed timeline. Because we only had about, I forget how many shooting days that we had in first unit in Matera, but it was less than 2 weeks. It was...
I forgot too, but yeah, exactly. It's like, I think...
The thing that was on the chopping block too is if we didn't get our days in Matera, then I couldn't get the days I wanted on the coast. So it was really important to me to get Madeline coming out of the water as a transition cut from that Norway ice thing. And that was one of those scenes where like people would have been very happy to lose that in terms of budget and schedule. That was our sort of pressure release valve day. And if we didn't get everything in Matera, we were shooting in Matera that day. And so part of my hustle was like making sure we finished Matera so I can get to the coast to get that scene. That's
also where Cary is very efficient. He likes to, he's very confident with the choice making on the day, or like we usually had figured out the scenes beforehand, but we would have a shot list of like how we want to tell the story and how he wants to cut the film. And the way the film is cut, apart from that it's shorter than it could be, is that it's in the same order like we intended on the day. And usually when you shoot a film, you have an intention on how to cut it, obviously, between us, and then it ends up being cut in a different way a little bit for different reasons. Could find new things in editing and whatever, right? But with this film, it's actually very much cut as it was intended, I think, on set. But in order for sure, but also not much actually gone for. It's like. When we, for example, or gave second unit, aerial unit, the objectives for the trawler shots that were in the script, it was night, right? So, but we felt that whole sequence, including Cuba and then the trawler, should be rather sort of a twilight, so you could see the ocean in a natural light instead of at pitch black. So it's just a boat out there. Illuminated somehow, that's going to be just black and boring. So to sort of stick to the heightened reality and the little bit romantic world, all of that is real, right? All the aerials of the plane exterior and the plane exploding is all in camera. And they were questioning second units, like, we're never going to make, like, how are we going to shoot? Like, we're going to have like 6 cameras to shoot that in that light, right? It's like, yeah, or you shoot it over 3 days, and you shoot first this shot when it approaches, and then you shoot 2 days of the exploding shot, and you don't need any other shots. It's like, and they did. I think they had a shot. They had a boat with a camera on to shoot it from the ocean level as well, which was never intended from Cary's side, or that's not what we wanted, and it wasn't in the film either. So, but it was a good safety, of course. But like what I'm saying is that. We could plan the film that way. Like we oftentimes shot one camera at a time, and
every now and then I do get surprised by another camera position. But usually I look at a camera over there that someone set up, and I'm like, not going to use that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's open this to questions from the floor. If you've got something you'd like to ask, please raise your hand. Yeah, we'll start right there. And if you could, we don't have audience mics, so if you could project with as few particles as possible, that would be great.
Okay, it's a very long film, but it doesn't feel long. So could you perhaps tell us how you met those challenges? Because presumably you had a very long script to start with, yeah?
Yeah, I think the script pages were close to 180. They're high, like 170 something. So we knew it was going to be close to 3 hours, in an efficient way of cutting. If you didn't hear in the back, he said the film is long, but it didn't feel long. There's still shots that I miss, that if I was being self-indulgent, I probably would have left in there. And I think anyone who knows who's cut a film here, that you do have to cut the things you like sometimes simply to keep things moving and keep momentum moving. And especially, I think, in a Bond film, like if I was making an art house film, I might be a bit more indulgent, which is why oftentimes art house films feel longer. I had 2 really incredible editors working on this, and they're very good at saying, like, you might hate this, at first because we've cut another 2 minutes out today. But tell me if you notice anything missing. And of course, I'd see where they'd cut it, and I'd have that your initial reaction is like, no, this is not the right thing to do. But you knew that if you let it sit for a while, do you really miss it, or you just got used to it? You know.
Yep, towards the back. Yep. No, you. Yes, looking around you. Yeah.
Okay. So so the child seems very young. She looks very young. So I wonder how you worked with her, because when she's separated from Madeleine in the poison garden, she looks truly, truly distressed. This is an incredible moment. So what was happening at that point?
She was totally acting, by the way. I mean, because as soon as we got the take, she was like smiling and being like, you know, she knew what she was doing, and she loved.
She was so fun.
She'd walk around and be like, I'm an actress.
She took my like still camera and started to take photos of me with it and stuff. She was very.
Her name is Lisa Dora. We spent a lot of time trying to find a kid, and I don't know if you guys ever seen a film. I think it's late '90s called Ponette, incredible French film called Ponette, and it has this performance by this girl that's incredible, and it's all about dealing with grief and death, and that was sort of my. This is what I said to Debbie, McReynolds. I was like, if we need a Ponette, we need a kid who's like experienced pain and trauma and feels the lacking or the absence of a father. And rather than having this sort of like bubbly kind of like talkative little thing, and I felt even when we first meet her and Bond says hello, and instead of saying hello, she just kind of like pushes a slinky down the stairs. Like I wanted her to be stoic, almost like him in a way, and to carry a sort of a weight with her. And for whatever reason, Lisa's not really like that in real life, but she was able to act it, which was kind of incredible for someone of that age.
There was another question up at the back. Yeah, there.
You alluded to this when you were talking earlier about the death of this Bond. And I'm just very curious, because I think it was something that was probably handed to you as a story trope by the producers. I'm just very curious as to why it was important for this Bond to die, which is something that was a massive surprise. Brilliant, by the way. Absolutely loved it. But why was it important to do that to this Bond?
I wouldn't be able to answer that on a global sense. Did everyone hear the question? Yeah. I wouldn't be able to answer that in terms of the global Bond films because this is the only one I've done. And as we all know, Barbara and Michael is very much a family-run franchise. And then that's what's kind of amazing about it is that despite how large it is, it's very much a mom-and-pop organization, or in this case, brother and sister. But I don't know if I've ever really got a complete answer whether it's coming from Daniel. It's something I heard a rumor that it's something he'd always wanted, but again, that's just a rumor. And then, obviously I know Barbara, it's amazing watching her. I've seen her watch the movie probably 10 plus times and she still gets emotional at the end. I mean, I think she's really loved working with Daniel and really loved this version of Bond. And I think watching him die is as painful for her as most audience members. Michael's much more sort of just like, yeah. About it, because I think from his money, there's going to be another James Bond. So this is just the end of this run. But I couldn't answer for them on that. I just know that it was, it's something that they felt was the right choice for this 5th installment.
I think we have time for one more. Let's go to you there.
Sorry, along the kind of same lines about the ending, which I thought was brilliant, by the way. You actually showed Bond kind of getting engulfed by the fireball. Was it always going to be that way? Did you need to make sure that there was no ambiguity about him dying, or did you ever consider kind of pulling back and not kind of showing that moment in detail and just showing the island?
Well, we spared you seeing him like reduced to bones, like in O'Connor in Terminator 2 or something. But it was important, I guess, also for what the choice to protect Madeleine and Mathilde means that everything about him must burn, essentially. Otherwise they would always be in danger. So that's part of it. But also we didn't want to be macabre with it, so use light and whatever, but not actually see anything. And it was also, I think, to not have this idea that he might have jumped down the sewers the last second.
We have now sadly reached the last second of this Q&A, but Cary and Linus, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for
coming.
Watching.